أشرف الأنام حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. قال الإمامنا سيد الشهداء عليه السلام: أنا قتيل العبرة لا يذكرني مؤمن إلا استعبر. صدق الإمامنا الكريم صلوات محمد. Another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Syed al-Shuhada is known by many of his famous titles. The most famous of them is the one that we use regularly, Syed al-Shuhada, the Master of Martyrs. Another one of his titles is, which is known in the books of narrations as Abu Abdillah. Another one of those famous titles of the Imam is Sibt al-Nabi, the grandson of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He is also known as Al-Madhloom, the one who is oppressed. He is also known as the one as Al-Gharib, the stranger. These are all of course referred to what happened in Karbala. However, another of those famous titles of Sayyid al-Shuhada is Qatilul Abra. This Qatilul Abra has been mentioned numerous amount of times in the books of narration. Here the Imam alayhi salam, he gives this title to himself, as we see on the authority of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala. Another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sayyid al-Shuhada, he gives this title to himself, where Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq says that Imam al-Hussain said, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. He says that Sayyid al-Shuhada, he said, Ana qatilul abra. We also have a narration where before Sayyid al-Shuhada was martyred, Amir al-Mu'mineen also refers to him as qatilul abra. As the narration goes, that one day Sayyid al-Shuhada was in the masjid of the Prophet. He was in the masjid, Amir al-Mu'mineen saw him. فنظر أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام and said, يا بني أنت قتيل العبرة. You are قتيل العبرة. So tonight I want to discuss what this قتيل العبرة means and what is the reason for Sayyid al-Shuhada giving this title to himself. Now we don't hear this title very often, قتيل العبرة. We hear Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abu Abdullah, al-Mazlum, al-Gharib, but we don't hear this قتيل العبرة. When Imam says, أنا قتيل العبرة, this word qatil means the one who was slaughtered. The one who was al-qatil. أنا قتيل العبرة. The Imam also uses the word abra. This word abra, it literally means to cross. If you was to go from one side of the road to the other, this would be known as ubur. Ubur, and the word ibra comes from the word ubur. Ubur and ibra is formed with the same form. So ibra or ubur means to cross. If I go from one area to another, this is ubur. So what is the correlation between ibra and crying for Imam al-Hussain? If I was to directly translate this title of the Imam as Qatilul Abra, it would refer to the one as the martyr of tears. Sayyid al-Shuhada is referred to as the one who was slain for the tears. This is Qatilul Abra. Now this Qatilul Abra, the word Abra means to cross. As we've mentioned, if I go from one area to another, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this word abra, its direct translation means to cross and to transfer oneself from one area to another. Similarly, the Imams have said that this word can be related to crying. Because when the Imam mentioned Ana qatil al-abra, he mentions another phrase. The Imam continues and says, لا يذكرني مؤمن إلا استعبر. That no mu'min shall remember me except that he cries. So the correlation is between the mu'min and the one who cries. So ibra, as a linguistic translation, it has been said that when a person has excessive grief and excessive pain, they tend to burst into tears. It's not to say that there are a few tears that are shed. They burst into tears. This is referred to as ista'bar. So the Imam is saying that the mu'min who remembers me, the only time the mu'min will remember me except that he also cries. So لا يذكرني مؤمن إلا استعبر. The mu'min shall remember me and he shall cry. So the word, why did the Imam say ibra? Or why did the Imam say abra? There are different ways that this word can be formed. The first of them being abra. Abra can be referred to as also a tear that is shed. But a direct translation, as we said, means to cross. So the word can be used as abra. It can be used as ibra. The word ibra comes into the Quran when Allah speaks about different stories of the Prophet. And Allah says that when these stories are mentioned, عِبْرَةً لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, that there is a lesson which should be taken. When there is a moral of a story, the moral tends to have a lesson. This is referred to ibra, with zir at the end, with the zir at the beginning, ibra, and abra with zabar. This is referred to as a tear. So what's the correlation between lesson and crying for the Imam? Because this word abra can also refer to as transferring yourself from one place to another. If we take the literal meaning as cross, you transfer yourself from one area to another. If we were to take ibra and we take the word as a lesson, when you hear the lesson of a story, you transfer. You are in one state before hearing the story. After you had heard the story and you have taken lesson, you have transferred to something else. This is by the name of ibrah. And when we cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada, we see that there is also a chemical transfer. That something which is inside the body has now transferred and released, and it is now outside of my body. So this word abra can be used for the tears and can be used in a literal way of crossing. So the tears that come out, this is also referred to as abra. And as we said, the Imam says, لا يذكرني مؤمن إلا استعبر. That no mu'min shall remember me except that he cries. This ista'bar refers to excessive grief, an excessive pain and sadness which overcomes a person. So this was the phrase of the Imam, and this is the title he has given himself as Qatilul Abra. I also want to discuss what is the importance of crying in the first place. As we see now on social media, that those who cry for Hussain are known as the Shia. Other groups of Islam would say we love Ahlul Bayt and we remember the tragedy of Ahlul Bayt, but they don't cry for what happened to them. And it is only the Shia that are connected with those who cry. I've also seen on the media, all you Shia do is you hit yourself and you cry and you do all this. So this label of crying has been given to us Shia. على الحسين أو أبكى أو تباكى وجبت له الجنة. This is a famous hadith that we've. What is the reason for why people cry? We know that in the life of the human being, crying is seen as a sign of weakness. Crying is a sign of vulnerability. If a tragedy has overcome somebody, you would see them and they would cry. So the nature of crying is within the human being. If there is a funeral that has taken place, so it could be a relative, a friend, somebody that's close to you that's passed away, the human being naturally would cry. He would shed a few tears. Why? Because he would remember the time he had with this person. And they would say, why is he not crying? For example, it's his mother's funeral, or it's one of his relatives' funeral, and he's not crying. It seems like this has not affected him, therefore he has not cried, he has not shed a tear. So the human being will look at this as a negative trait, those who don't cry. So therefore we see that crying is within human nature. Crying has also been emphasized by the Ahlul Bayt, and the reward for crying for Sayyid al-Shuhada. Therefore, we also see that there are types of people who cry. Everybody who were taken as captives and who were paraded, I think about my own women. Imagine this happened to my women. Therefore I cry. So this is the human characteristic of crying. The second type of crying, and those who cry, is those who cry for reward. The reason why we cry is because we have been promised X, Y, and Z, and therefore we cry. This is also an answer that is given. Why is this a reason? Because of the hadith I mentioned, وَجَبَتْ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Or the Imam also says that whoever cries and whoever sheds a tear, the size of the wing of the fly's wing. If you shed a tear which is the size of that wing, then Allah has made Jannah obligatory upon you. This is also the reward of crying. So therefore people cry because of the reward. However, there is a third group which the scholars there was nobody in his household, and therefore in the battle of Uhud, when those people had been martyred, each martyr had a household to mourn them. They had people to mourn for them. They had their wives, mothers, daughters, sisters. They were there to mourn for that martyr. However, when Hamza was martyred, there was nobody to cry for him. Then a group of people decided to come, and they said, we will mourn for Hamza, because the reason why we mourn for him is because number one, there is no one to mourn from him from his household. He had no household. And therefore the second reason was why we mourn for him is because we want to comfort Rasulullah. We want to keep Rasulullah at ease. Therefore we cry. And this is another reason why people cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada, is when Rasulullah sees that there are people who are crying for his grandson and what afflicted upon him, this brings ease to Rasulullah. So these are the three types of people. The human trait of crying, the one who cries for the reward, and the one who cries to ease and comfort Rasulullah. So these are the levels of mourners in society that we have, and even in the time of the Prophet. There is also another story where some people might object. They say crying is not a manly thing, we shouldn't cry. I've even heard someone, crying is for women. The men shouldn't cry. The men are seen as the strong, firm individuals in society. If they cry, it is a sign of weakness. Therefore, there is another story where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where Rasulullah's son Ibrahim, who passed away and is buried in Jannatul Baqi, and he died at the age of 3. Therefore, before the Prophet's son Ibrahim had passed away, before his soul had left his body, Rasulullah was with his son and he began to cry. He began to cry, and those around him, the companions, They said, Ya Rasulullah, we did not expect you to cry. Out of all people, you being the messenger of Allah, you being the one who is the most bravest of all, the one who is firm, we did not expect you to cry out of all people. Then the Prophet said that how is it that I cannot cry? Since crying is part of the human nature, as the first point. It is the human characteristic. It is innate within every single human being that when a tragedy is afflicted upon them, they cry. And therefore Rasulullah said that it is nature of the human that he cries. And he also said, how can I not cry when my son has passed away? So this is the types of people who cry, and they have been split into 3 groups. Also the objections. There are many questioners amongst the Shia community which say, how is it that those who cry even a small 1 tear for Sayyid al-Shuhada, they are rewarded all these great rewards? Again, one of them being they are obligated paradise if they shed 1 tear. Or even if they feign and they pretend like they are crying, they are given Jannah. So why is the station of crying equal to that reward? In our human nature, we had this concept of reward and the equal to its act. What do I mean by this principle? The analogy I would use is that, for example, there's a child, you have a child, and this child, he's passed the spelling test on a Friday. He's passed this test on a Friday. And this test was a very big thing for him. For the child, this is a huge thing. I got full marks. Now, it is not logically sound that the father or the guardian of this child, yes, he is happy for the child that he has passed the spelling test, but is it sound that the guardian will buy him a house? He will not buy him a house for passing a test, a spelling test. He will not buy him a car. He will not buy him ounces of gold, because it is not equal to the act. However, this principle is not in the eyes of Allah. As Allah Himself says that those who commit 1 good deed, Allah will reward them for 10. So Allah multiplies it by 10. So this act of equality for the action is not within the eyes of Allah. And therefore, even just for remembering about Abdullah and Sayyid al-Shuhada for what happened to him, then Allah would be generous enough and would give us all the bounties of Jannah just for remembering Sayyid al-Shuhada's tragedy. So this concept of equal to act and reward to act, the ratio is not in the eyes of Allah. However, it's within our human nature. Another objection is that when it comes to the feigning, some people would say that no, even if you go to majlis and you fake cry, they use this word fake. You fake cry and you do all sorts. However, the Imam, when he uses this word tabaka, it means that when somebody makes the face of cry. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to make sound and you have to shout really loud and you have to do all sorts. The example is that when somebody walks into the masjid where there is a majlis taking place, and that person walks in and he sees people sitting down, to him that he should feel that this whole they are in grief, they are in pain. This should be the first instinct of the person who walks in. Sometimes in the majlis, even if we don't understand, no problem if you don't understand, but you should not sit there in a way where nothing is going on. You know that the tragedy is being spoken, the masa'ib is the lights have been turned off. Don't sit there and see that the moment is not something of reward. Whereas if you act in that moment, you will get reward. And the rewards have been promised. Sometimes I see that when the lights have been turned off and the scholar is reciting the masa'ib, the people are just looking at him, looking around. We should utilize this moment and gain reward, even by just looking down just by looking down, whether you have no tears in your eyes, whether you do not understand the majlis, just by looking down, you are rewarded. So we should utilize these opportunities when they come. So this is one objection. So the two objections are the reward itself. How is it that somebody can get this much reward? And the other is faking of crime and feigning. This has been spoken about by the Ahlul Bayt. There is a story of this feigning where Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam where the ayat of the final ayat of Surah Al-Zumar were being revealed. As the Prophet was reciting these verses in the masjid, the people began to cry. The companions and associates of the Prophet, they began to cry very loudly, they began to wail. After this revelation had been complete, there was a companion which saw that there was a companion in the back of the masjid. He was crying. And he had his face down, he had his hand on his head. And the companion said to him, "Why is it that you cried? What was the reason that you cried?" Maybe it was this particular verse or this particular wording that made me cry. That companion then responded saying, "No, I wasn't crying. I was pretending to cry." He was pretending to cry. He wasn't actually shedding any tears. This was then brought to the Prophet. And the Prophet said that whoever even pretends to cry, they are also rewarded. Just for feigning and putting yourself in this way that you are in grief, you also get reward. So again, we should utilize these opportunities. Also, similarly, when the Prophet would recite Surah Al-Takathur, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhaakum al-Takathur, Hatta zurtum al-Maqabir. When the Prophet was reciting this surah, the companions started to cry. Some of them were pretending. And those companions who pretended to cry, they were also rewarded. So it is very important that we, even if we don't understand, and this is especially to those who don't understand, mainly the youth, those who don't understand, yes, you come to the majlis. You come to the majlis because you understand the importance of majlis. You understand the importance of sitting on the ground. You come out of your way, of your busy schedule, you make time for yourself to come to the majlis and to remember Abu Abdullah. There is reward in this. And there have been many things which have been written for this reward. Where one of the Imams alayhi salam, they said that those who even take one step towards the azab of Abu Abdullah, they are rewarded for Hajj and Umrah, just for taking one step. So the objection, again another objection is that how can you give that much reward? How can you give Hajj and Umrah just for taking one step? Or even another hadith is where the Imam says those who cry for Abu Abdullah, their sins are forgiven. All of their sins are wiped. And it's a clean slate. So how would you respond to this objection when you go to Hajj? The hadith says that those who go to Hajj and they finish Hajj and they complete the pilgrimage, it is as they are a newborn and they have no sins on them. But you don't object to this hadith, you don't say anything about this reward. So the reward for the crying has been promised. Another objection and another question which comes to the mind of the people is that why do we mourn for people who have high positions? Sayyid al-Shuhada, Rasulullah, Sayyid Fatima Zahra, they are all in Jannah. They have all been promised and been given the bounties of paradise. So why are we crying for them? There's no need to cry for them. They are not being afflicted with pain today. They are not being afflicted with grief in the heavens. The scholars have explained it in an analogy. Let's say there is a child, and this child he's been kidnapped. This child has been kidnapped, and the child has been tortured and he's been beat. Before this child was kidnapped, the people could see that this child, he has lots of potential, he is very bright, he is very good at talking to the people. Lots of potential this child has. But now this child has been kidnapped, And after he's been kidnapped, he has broken his arm, he's broken his leg and whatnot. A few years go by, and this broken leg of his, for example, his leg has stopped him to play a specific sport, for example. However, he continues to play the sport. He tries to play as much as he can. Although he doesn't have the full potential to play the sport, he continues to play and tries to play. And therefore, the people who run this sport and this organization, they give him a reward, a certificate. They give him the certificate of perseverance. This child has been given the reward because he is injured, but he is persevering and trying to play the sport. Therefore, we give him this certificate. Now, would we say that the injury that the child had, was that a good thing? Because the outcome of it was the certificate. The outcome of it was respect from the people. In the human mind, that this injury that he had, the kidnapping and the trauma that fell upon the child, this is not a good thing. However, the outcome of it was good. The outcome of it was a certificate of respect, of perseverance. But the trauma which has been inflicted still remains. So therefore, when we cry for Abu Abdullah, it is not that we cry because of his position. We cry is because of what was afflicted upon him. We cry because of what he went through. We cry because he was killed thirsty. We cry because his family members were martyred. However, because of this sacrifice, and no sacrifice was given like Abu Abdullah. No prophet gave a sacrifice like Sayyid al-Shuhada. And because of this sacrifice, he was rewarded greatly. So yes, we are happy for Sayyid al-Shuhada that he has this station and he has this maqam in the eyes of Allah. However, why we cry is because of what was afflicted upon him. So this is the reason why we cry for Abu Abdullah. And also there was a very famous scholar by the name of Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, who is buried in Najaf in the haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Where he was a jurist, he was a well-known jurist amongst the people. It is said that this Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he would regularly meet the Imam. And every time he would meet the Imam, he would recognize him. However, one occasion, and this one occasion, he did not recognize the Imam. As Sayyid Bahrul Ulum was traveling, and he began to think that this reward for crying for Sayyid al-Shuhada, this reward that has been promised, wajabat lahul Jannah, Jannah has been promised for them, and if they cry, then their sins are forgiven. These things which have been promised, are they exaggerated in any way? Have they been exaggerated to the point where some people can exploit crying and they can misuse crying and majlis for reward? As he was thinking about this, there was a Bedouin Arab that came. And he was wearing the clothes of a Bedouin, somebody who lives in the village, outside of the city. This Bedouin came and said to Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, and he said to him, what is it that you are thinking about? There is something on your mind that's bothering you. The Sayyid then said that I am thinking about the reward. I'm thinking about the reward that is given for crying for Sayyid al-Shuhada. How is it that somebody can be given this much reward? The Bedouin Arab then gives an analogy. He says that one day there was a king, a very wealthy king. And he decided to go out to hunt for the animals. As he went to go hunt, after a few hours had gone by, he was very thirsty and he was very hungry. Therefore, he stumbled across a very old, barren woman. And he asked and requested this woman, do you have anything for me to eat? And do you have anything for me to drink? The woman then said, all I have is this sheep, all I have is this goat, and this is all I have. This is how I get my rizq and my sustenance from this goat. Therefore the woman decided to milk the goat and give the milk to the king to quench his thirst. Also she decided to slaughter the goat and give the meat to the king. After the king was full and he had been satisfied and his thirst has been quenched, Salawat al-Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another loud Salawat al-Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. After the king had been satisfied with the meat of this goat and the milk, the king said to the woman, if you ever need a favor from me, if there is ever a time where you are in need, come to my palace. If you come to my palace, I will aid you and I will assist you. Therefore, a few hours went by. Her son came and he said, where is the goat that we had? She said that I had given it away. There was somebody who was in need and they needed the food and the milk of the goat. I gave it away. A few days had gone by and there was a famine. And there was not enough food or water to survive. Then the woman remembered the favor of the king. She said, there was a king that I helped. And the king said to me, if you are ever in need of assistance, come to my palace. Therefore she sent her son to the palace. The son then said to the king that I am the son of the woman who helped you when you was in need. And you said that you would assist my mother with anything that she needs. The king remembered this favor. He went to his advisors. He went to the people where he gets mashwara, advice from. And he said to them, what is it that I should give this woman? One of the advisors said, you should give them 10,000 gold coins. Another of them said, you should give them 50,000 gold coins. The king said no. Another one of them said, give them this much amount of gold. The king said no. Then the king realized that this woman, she had given everything that she owned when I needed it. What was it that she owned? A goat, that's all. And because she gave everything to me, that she had, everything that she owned, she gave to me, it is my right that I give everything that I own, I give it back to her. This is how I will repay the favor. All of the possessions I have, my palace, the gold, the silver, everything that I have, which is my possession, I give to this old woman. And therefore then this Bedouin said to Syed Bahr al-Ulum, he said to him, Sayyid al-Shuhada gave everything for the sake of Allah. He gave everything, his family members, his companions, his 6 month old infant he gave for the sake of Allah. And therefore it is the right of Allah that He gives the paradise and everything to Hussain alayhi salam. Because Sayyid al-Shuhada gave everything, therefore Allah decided to give all the heavens to Sayyid al-Shuhada. And therefore when we cry, the Bedouin then said to Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum, he said to him, and therefore when we cry for Abu Abdullah, Allah is so merciful, and because we are crying for Hussain, who owns the paradise? Sayyid al-Shuhada. Because of his sacrifice, he owns the paradise. And therefore, because we remember him and we cry about what afflicted him, therefore Allah gives us the Jannah which is in the hands of Hussain. Even just one tear, as the hadith I mentioned. Those who cry for Hussain, wajabat lahul Jannah. They are promised paradise. Even the one who cries and the tear that he sheds, that one tear which he sheds and it is the size of the wing of the fly, then paradise is obligatory upon him. And therefore this is why the reward of crying for Sayyid al-Shuhada is so great. And therefore after Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum was told this story, he began to cry. Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum realized the reward of crying, and this is not an exaggeration. This is not something which has been exaggerated because of the Shia themselves. He began to cry. As he wiped the tears from his eyes, the Bedouin disappeared. He disappeared from his sight, and then he realized and remembered that this was Imam Sahib Zaman, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli. And therefore this is why we cry, and therefore this is why the Imam says that أنا قتيل العبرة, I am the martyr of tears. لا يذكرني مؤمن إلا استعبر, and that the mu'min, there is no mu'min that remembers me except that he cries. And this is why this title was given to Syed the Shuhada by him. He gave this to himself. He attributes this title for himself. And therefore we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq to continuously come to the majlis of Abu Abdullah and to remember him and to cry for him and for his family and what afflicted him. As we know, there are people again who are killed for going to majlis. They are killed just for remembering Abu Abdullah. So we should be thankful to Allah that we have this ni'mah, that we are able to remember Abu Abdullah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He keeps us firm on the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Yusuf al-Zahra, Imam Sahib al-Dar. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وصلى اللهم على محمد وآل محمد.